Hello and welcome everyone. I'm very pleased to welcome you today to the Smart Transport webinar, which we've prepared in association with Raleigh. Thank you very much for coming today, and thank you too to my guests, Ed Pegram, the Business Director of Raleigh UK, Kevin Main, Chief Executive of Cycling Industries Europe, Rob King, the CEO of Zedify, and Sarah Kameta, Senior Innovation Officer at Transport Strategy for Transport for Greater Manchester. So I'm Beata Kubitz. I'm a new mobility researcher, writer, and also the founder of Cargodale, which is a very small cargo bike delivery company, a community interest company in Yorkshire, where we're trailblazing to show the way to cargo bikes in more rural areas, not just in the city centres and the extremely dense urban areas. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at today is sustainability in active travel. Basically, how sustainable can we make active travel? Obviously, active travel is extremely sustainable in and of itself, but how much more sustainable can we make it? How low carbon can we make it? And how far can we push it? Is it just something for the centre of cities, or is it a much broader movement that everyone can participate in? The format is that we will, all our speakers will speak a little about their role in this endeavour, and then after that I'll throw it open to questions. You'll be able to place your questions in the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll be collating those questions and asking people at the end of the session, at the end of the presentations or discussions. So without any further ado, thank you very much for sponsoring this seminar today, Ed at Raleigh. And can you tell us a little bit more about your role in active travel and sustainability?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon. So my name's Ed Pegram. I'm the Commercial Partnerships Manager at Raleigh. Predominantly my role focuses on working with businesses and local authorities or any entity for that matter on the introduction of bikes, electric bikes and cargo bikes. I guess most recently, I've been really fortunate to work on various projects on the introduction of cargo bikes into cities such as Birmingham, Nottingham, Leeds, Sheffield, and Cambridge, actually, with partnering with the Outspoken Cycles on a try before you buy type loan scheme that has been arranged by the local authorities in the area. So a really interesting role, and obviously micromobility, sustainable micromobility, whether individual transport or for commercial purposes, is absolutely growing and a really exciting time for cargo bikes as well in particular.
The old unmute your mic issues. Kevin, speaking to us from Brussels, can you tell us a little bit more about Cycling Industries Europe and your role in active travel, promotion of cycling in the UK and worldwide?
Thanks, Beata. Nice to be on the call. Thank you for the invitation. Some of you may recognise the face. I suppose I've been in the cycling advocacy stroke lobby world now for something over 20 years. And in the UK, I was the chief exec of what is now Cycling UK before I came to Brussels to work on the international scale. Cycling Industries Europe is effectively the lobby and coordination body for companies at the European level to try and obviously present what companies can offer and to put the business voice into the lobby work alongside the consumer associations, bodies like Sustrans, others that are in other associations. And I think what's really important is that there is an expectation that business demonstrates not only the products, but also kind of good corporate, sustainable, responsible behavior in this whole process. And I'm quite excited that the cycling industries are at the forefront of that. And we're also, I think, increasingly part of a kind of real conversation about innovation and about different ways of doing things. And great, we've already mentioned cargo bikes, but the bike share world keeps evolving. The the possibilities for connected bikes and what's called mobility as a service are really, really exciting. And at its most basic level, there are few sectors that have done as well as us through the COVID pandemic and emerging from the other side. And that isn't just because a bunch of people decided to ride and buy bikes. It's because we have coordinated, we have planned, we have worked, we have lobbied, we've got into cities, and we've sent the message out about what cycling can do if you give kind of access and space and technology to people. And I think that's the kind of real exciting contribution. And at the moment, it's win-win all the way around. It's a great industrial story, it's a great sustainability story, and it's a great societal story. So happy to share some of our learnings.
Thank you, Kevin. Rob, would you like to elaborate on what Zedify is up to at the moment?
Super, yeah, thanks, Beata. So yeah, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Zedify. We do first and last mile deliveries in cities using electric cargo bikes, electric cargo trikes. And central to our model is utilizing micro consolidation hubs on the edge of urban areas that act as a sort of gateway for deliveries coming into and out of a city. And that means that rather than just do some of the what we call only mile deliveries that happen in cities, picking up from local businesses, taking to people locally, we can actually be connected with everything that's going on in outside that city, but we can utilize the cargo bikes that perform and are optimized brilliantly for the city environment, and utilizing those hubs as that sort of gateway. So our services are not just only mile stuff that happens within city, but we also do collections on behalf of our customers that happen to be going off to Scotland or internationally. We go and collect those, bring them back to our depot where they're consolidated, and then they go off with one of our partners like DHL, and that's a little bit of a win-win really, I suppose. For the city, it benefits in terms of reducing emissions in the city, but it's also a real benefit for our partners because they don't want to be picking up small 1 and 2 items from small little shops. They can just come to our consolidation hubs and pick up lots of deliveries. And we also do the same for last mile deliveries in that work with partners, retailers, some of the larger logistics companies, utilize our hubs, drop off there, and then we do that last mile. And I guess the real benefit is around utilizing vehicles, in our case, electric cargo bikes, electric cargo trikes, that are really optimized for that city environment. They can get through the city much better. So that offers quite a lot of advantages for our customers. And obviously it has lots of city benefits in terms of reducing emissions. And our consolidation bit in all of that means that we can actually increase the efficiencies of deliveries happening in cities at the same time. We're not just trying to do more and more and remode, but also consolidate at the same time. So in terms of our sort of impact and input, I suppose, into active travel, I think that comes in 2 forms. One is about showcasing cargo bikes and what they can do. We operate out of 10 hubs across the UK. We've got around 150 odd staff and therefore cargo bikes. And I think, showcasing what cargo bikes can do is a really important thing. But also then in terms of the actual staff and the creation of really valuable, good quality jobs. Many of our staff do it as a lifestyle choice alongside other things. They might be freelance teachers or graphic designers or photographers, or they might just want to do it as a full-time job. But either way, they're doing something that's out there, being active and keeping healthy. So I think it's some really, really strong stuff there around active travel and our responsibility in trying to encourage more of these jobs to happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. It's very wide-ranging. Sarah, how's TFGM getting on with integrating electric bikes and otherwise in its plans for sustainable transport?
Yeah, so hi everyone. As Beata mentioned, I'm Sarah Commuter, Senior Innovation Officer at Transport for Greater Manchester. I wanted to highlight one project that we're working on at the moment, actually called eHubs. So TFGM is a project partner with Interest Northwest Europe, and the project aims to accelerate the transition to shared electric mobility services in the hope of reducing carbon emissions and increasing levels of active travel. The main way that it's doing this, it's partnered with 6 other cities across Northwest Europe, and the aim is to complete 92 e-hubs in total, which comprise of e-cars as well as e-bikes and e-cargo bikes. In Greater Manchester, we're looking to introduce 10 electric vehicles, but also 25 e-cargo bikes. And we hope by doing this that we'll be able to get more people used to using e-cargo bikes. I still think it's quite a new form of micromobility, and it encourages people to be able to use them on a lease basis. We're getting more people to cycle by capitalising on record levels of cycle that we've seen during the pandemic, and also the levels of cycle infrastructure investment we've seen in Greater Manchester. And we're hoping that these e-hubs will create almost like a blueprint of how we can roll them out further in the city and encourage more people to engage in sustainable travel practices. That's for me.
Thank you. So now everyone's introduced themselves. This is more of the curated chat part of our session, which means that I am very keen for people to put their questions in the question panel on the side. Your questions are valued and will be used to direct the discussion. And we don't have presentation slides. This is just us and our conversation. So I'm actually going to kick off some questions, because I think the trying things out and the learning and the behaviour change that's happening in sustainable travel is one of the most important things to me. That we've actually had a period where it's become harder and harder to cycle on the roads. The roads have become very busy, they've become very full, up until quite recently, when suddenly we had a global pandemic and the roads emptied out and we suddenly had lots of people trying to cycle, and it was very exciting as a transport person to see so many people on bikes and to see so many people prepared to try new things, and as a cargo bike volunteer to suddenly be able to try out cargo bikes. But from my kind of personal enthusiasm, it also has occurred to me that training and actually giving people a bit more of a structured approach is quite important. And I thought I'd like to ask you collectively and individually what kinds of training and initiation you've done to get people involved in trying new things, trying e-bikes. I don't know if I could start with you, Rob, because you obviously have a structured program to get your people to learn how to cargo bike, and it's definitely different.
Sure, thanks, Beata. Yes, we have pretty thorough outcome-based training program. Obviously, the bikes that we use, the cargo bikes, cargo trikes, some of them are very unusual and very different to what anyone would ever have experienced before. And is a particular challenge of us. We can get people that come in and have done very little cycling and find they take to using a trike really well. And we have some people that've been on done thousands of miles every week on road bikes and really struggle on a trike. It's a very different experience. So we start off as almost a prerequisite for all of our riders that they go and do the highest level in national standards training. That tells us that they're an experienced urban cyclist. So they go and do that normally independently before they come and join us. And then on day one, we have a 2 to 3 hour orientation training program where we go out on the vehicles, talk about what the differences are between a cargo bike and an ordinary bike. And there are tons of them, everything from stopping distances, visibility, braking, electric systems. There's quite a lot of things to be aware of. And then in terms of where they can ride them is pretty variable as well. They are legally electric assist pedal cycles. So legally they're allowed on any, in the UK, any cycle paths, shared use cycle paths, but many of those are actually inappropriate for a large vehicle. These cargo trikes can take 150 kilos. Most of them are just over 1 metre in width. And going around a shared use path with 100 people waiting at a bus stop, probably inappropriate for a vehicle like that. So there's a lot of things to think about. There's a lot of stuff around hazard awareness, and there's a lot of stuff around cycle infrastructure, particularly new cycle infrastructure. And then there's a whole load of stuff on parking the vehicles before you even start getting onto the sort of internal bit of training about how you look after customers when you go there. So there's an awful lot to take on. We do a 2.5-hour session on that, and then the guys go out and they do a whole load of real deliveries and practice. And then we have a further sort of test, I suppose, which is almost the same as the initial training program, going through everything and just checking that they are doing everything appropriately. They are have really good awareness of other road users. They can park their vehicles properly. And we do an online test as well, just to back that up in terms of lots of images of, here's a cargo bike parked in a disabled parking bay. Is this an appropriate place to park it? All that sort of stuff, just to give us a good grounding for our riders, that they've got all the necessary skills and ability to get on. So that's really our training program that we do. Sorry, that probably took longer than I expected to talk through. Thank you.
Thank you. And I was thinking also from a kind of more consumer, individual traveller sort of point of view, I don't know whether Ed or Sarah would like to sort of look at, say, what kind of things they're doing to, I know Sarah's doing, looking at these mobility hubs. Do you have ways of integrating, getting people involved, giving them a go before they launch themselves on the unsuspecting road?
Yeah, this has been actually quite a big challenge in the project so far, because a lot of people, like you say, haven't used cargo bikes before, and just to let them loose on them is a bit of a concern. So we've actually been working quite a lot with Cargaroo, who are the providers of the e-cargo bikes, to produce almost like a safety video that they have to watch in advance, just to make people aware of, how it is different to a normal road bike. We've also where we've placed the e-hubs are quite residential, because we want to make sure while people are quite new to them, they're away from busy roads, so they can get a feel for them before they go maybe further out onto more complex roads. Before we launch them as well, COVID permitting, we want to have a number of open days just to give people the chance to come and ride them and have a try of the vehicles before they actually rent them. And that's something that we're really keen to do before we set up the e-hubs in the summer of this year, and hopefully we can go ahead with them.
Ed, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah,
I'll come to Kevin about legislation lost.
From a manufacturer point of view, we obviously want to introduce electric bikes and cargo bikes sustainably, and so generally speaking, a huge part of what I've been doing is offering trials of cargo bikes, generally speaking, on either closed roads, not off road, but not on a busy road, and then that's followed by a more long-term trial, and then taking the bikes onto the roads. And equally, we're working with various training providers to offer introductions to businesses or local authorities that are looking to introduce cargo bikes. And I think it was mentioned previously about training should be important, but not go too far as to be a barrier to the introduction of bikes. That's not what we want to achieve. And equally on electric bikes, again, I think it almost needs a wider view, perhaps from central government, to increase the funding that is available for training, and not just for children. I think it's really important to consider there are lots of adults out there that perhaps don't know how to ride a bike, and you've only got to look at the project by the Active Wellbeing Society in Birmingham on the introduction of bicycles there, and they've trained some 2,500 adults to ride bikes, which is just great. So yeah, I think training is important.
Thank you. Kevin, just a quick one, because I know there's quite a lot of consultation about standards for e-cargo bikes at the moment, and also whilst we've got you, I have got a specific question about what's hoped for in respect of legislation regarding higher power e-bikes. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, at a European Union level, and therefore, though not including UK, will have a bigger impact on market, and therefore the bikes coming in and the bikes leaving. So I think we can take it as a general trend. There's currently a top to bottom review of the regulations for personal mobility devices. So everything from e-steps to hoverboards, and including e-bikes and cargo bikes. The whole cycling community, European level, is pretty well united around the fact we want to keep the current regime for e-bikes as bicycles, as 25 kilometers an hour, as a kind of clear, just a subset of cycling. It makes adoption easy. It makes it clear what can go on the bike path. It means no helmets licenses, and the whole package hangs together. Now, currently there is allowance for a thing called the speed pedelec, which is basically covered by moped legislation. There's some division in the industry about what should happen there, and I think it very much falls on how you perceive speed. If you perceive that speed is essential and is essential to kind of selling more bikes, then you might say, well, we want more of these in the system. If, as I think more of us, and I personally believe, the answer is a lot more slow cyclists and a lot broader diversity and a lot more, older, younger, disability, gender balanced cycling, speed's almost irrelevant. And if people want to do 45 kilometers an hour, then they should either be an athlete or maybe they should get a license, because it's a different activity. And if I can just kind of almost lean out my window and see groups of seniors riding a mixture of bikes and e-bikes around since it's, during COVID, speed is not the issue to the biggest bicycle markets in the world. And I think some of the community have just got to get over that obsession in order to understand where the real growth is. And if we're asking drivers to slow down in cities, we can ask bikes to slow down in cities. But there is a space for those faster 45k machines for interurban where we could substitute car journeys. And on the cargo bike side, we're actually arguing very similarly that slower speeds in the urban area don't need to be heavily regulated. They can be maintained as bicycles. If you really want to drive and ride something that's a bit like a small truck, you probably should accept it's going to be regulated like a vehicle and will reach the higher standard. And we have a European expert group, which has British and all sorts of international members, Ed's company, others are all part of that. And we're pretty coherent on that plan for the whole e-assist segment. Keep as much as possible close to bikes, but accept that it's all about managing speed.
Thank you. Very interesting answers. I think a lot of it does come down to infrastructure and the availability of infrastructure in areas where there are quite a few questions coming through about new riders and training and people being just taking to the roads on bikes. But I think sometimes that depends very much on the standards of infrastructure, because if you're on a bike lane and you're a bit wobbly, doesn't really matter. You're on a bike lane, you're protected from the traffic. You're not, car drivers can't claim that they're in their way or anything. But if that infrastructure isn't there, then you don't have the confidence to get in onto a bike in the first place. But also, if you are a bit wobbly, it can be quite an unsettling experience for all concerned. I know that Sarah mentioned that you've got quite a lot of plans in Manchester for better infrastructure. Do you want to outline how those sorts of mobility hubs might integrate into a wider transport network, into other forms of transport, bus or car share, buses, trains? How's that kind of being planned at the moment?
Well, this is why I think we think the eHubs project is so important, because we want to use this as a trial to understand, how they do work in the city, and then how can we learn from that to improve not only, improvements to new infrastructure, but also adaptations to existing infrastructure. I think we all know that e-cargo bikes, they're wider, they're heavier, they need more adequate space for turning compared to normal bikes. But at the moment, they're used not very much by people, and we're hoping that this trial will allow us to learn what is needed to adapt existing infrastructure. We need to ensure that what we do have in terms of new cycle infrastructure is protected so people can use the cargo bikes. But like I say, at the moment, this is kind of a learning curve for us, and we're hoping that it feeds into other programs that we're looking into.
I have a question. I don't suppose you have any plans for people to be able to trade in their cars for bikes or get any kind of mobility credits or anything if they start to use the eHubs?
Not at the moment, but the Cargaroo have a model that you pay for the bikes per hour. So it's just encouraging people to realise the benefits really, and if we can really highlight that through how we promote the hubs, we're hoping to encourage people to use the e-cargo bikes instead of using cars for small trips. So yeah, it's just making people aware of what alternatives are out there and encouraging them through the marketing of the e-hubs.
So moving away from the bigger towns, we've had a question specifically about what potential there is for cargo bikes in smaller market towns and semi-rural areas. And obviously I want to big up Cargodale, which I've been promoting as a model for doing this kind of thing. And because it's very interesting that in quite small towns, you don't have the huge distances. You might have a shop that supplies, we have a town down the road, Hebden Bridge, it supplies 50 veg boxes within the 5,000 person town. So those drops, I'm looking at Rob here because drop density will be his bread and butter. If you're delivering 50 boxes within a 5,000 population town, your drop density is pretty fine for being in a small town. And I just wondered, is this at all unusual, or is this something that you could possibly foresee, Rob, for expansion of Zedify, looking at other areas where you might have kind of micro modules or connections? Because I was quite interested in your out of your town edge model as well.
Yeah, I think the big change for us has been that we used to only offer deliveries for like local businesses, all happening locally, and generally we found that within a 3-mile radius of our hub is about the optimum. As soon as we find ourselves being overtaken by vans, we feel like we're in the wrong vehicle for the job, I suppose. And it was also a bit of a problem for our customers in that we could say, yeah, we could do all these deliveries that within sort of 3 or 4 miles of your shop, but I'm really sorry if you've got something that's 10 miles away. Sorry, you're on your own. You've got to go and find a different supplier, or if you need to send something up to Scotland, I'm really sorry, we can't help you. So I think that's really changed. Now we've got an integration in place with some of the third-party logistics companies, because we have a role, and our role is in their cities to go, well, actually, in this environment, the cargo bike works best. We've come up with a formula that means we can commercialize and make that work by using those consolidation hubs. And suddenly there's a huge amount of more volume. Think about a local shop. They might typically only have 10 or 20% that's within the very local area, and the rest of it's going outside that area. So if we can go, well, actually, we can do all of your first mile collections and put all those onto a cargo bike. We've actually, provided the shop with a really great service in that they just have to find one provider for all of their deliveries. And we've done something really beneficial for the city or very small town at the same time. And I think what's changed is that suddenly makes it potentially commercially viable in quite small cities and environments. And probably been accelerated by COVID actually as well, in terms of expectation of deliveries. A lot of those local shops people would have just gone to on foot, and now relying on having deliveries being made. So I think there's really big opportunities. I don't know about rural, because we don't get involved in rural, and that's very much your thing. But if you can make it work in Yorkshire, it can work anywhere, right?
You kind of hope so. I don't know, Kevin or Ed, whether you're doing research or getting inquiries from more diverse kinds of communities. Kevin,
Well, I mean, it's you could argue across, when you've got a chance to look across the whole of Europe, we've got to think of the possibilities from remote towns in Nordic, the North Nordic countries, through to the density of the Netherlands or Flanders, and it is not obvious that anything is impossible, but underneath it, the big evolution is in kind of business models, because if you can create networks, you can network companies. The biggest barrier of all, often, as Rob probably more than anybody knows, is things like the digital connection to the courier companies or to the customers, so that you've got a platform. And there's some really interesting things happening. There's companies, I remember, called Store Shippers, and I think they work with Rob. But Store Shippers' idea is that anywhere there's a group of small retailers, you can allow them to get into a kind of cargo bike process, but you need some help to create that platform, to put them in touch with local shippers like Rob, and actually kind of create that idea that they can be part of it. You do not need to be Amazon. But the barriers in terms of are as much likely to be digital as they are to be physically, can I move around? And I know as smart as this. I mean, my first cargo bike experience is my grandfather cycling around rural Suffolk on his kind of delivery bike, delivering prescriptions from the chemist shop for our local chemist. And, to the day he died, he was known as the boy, because the boy delivered the parcels. And so, we have a long tradition of that being possible. And, but the model and the business model and the way it works gets more complicated and trickier. So I think our job through for example, our logistics group, or for our innovation group and our connected cycling groups, is to make sure people meet the kind of supplier of software, or the supplier of bikes, the logistics company. And even if we can persuade a city, persuade Sarah, someone else to kind of run a pilot, then we can kind of establish a 21st century case for this and get it into business. And there is a good opportunity with research and pilot funding from various levels, from the EU down to individual cities, to make some of these things happen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'd wholeheartedly agree with that point Kevin made there. I think the possibilities are pretty endless for cargo bikes, and it's not something new. This has been around for hundreds of years, to be honest. And I think one thing that we have Raleigh has taken note of is the fact that there is this emerging requirement for cargo bikes to be a shared asset, whether it's between, I don't know, a group of food banks, for example, or my example was going to be the Nottingham Commons cargo bike, which is going to be essentially a crowd-funded cargo bike that would be a shared asset between businesses that are on the outskirts of a particular area in Nottingham. And again, that would be technology-based, app-based. You'd be able to book the bike for a period of time. Companies would then be able to use it and then effectively, unbook it, for want of a better word, for the next business to use. And I think that's going to be an emerging thing that we'll see over the next few years. And really, my point was that cargo bikes can be really cost effective if they are a shared asset in that way.
I just want to echo that, if I may, Beata. I think it's very important, and we talk about e-bikes, not just cargo bikes. I mean, they're not a magic bullet. There are two things they cannot do. One is they cannot magic thousands of pounds into someone's pocket if they just can't afford the initial outlay. So leasing, sharing, commons, being able to buy a service of a third party like Rob. I mean, so you can access this service is crucial. And we're dealing with countries like Romania with very low GDP. We're actually saying to cities there, look, don't imagine someone owning an e-bike, but do imagine that you, the city, could put in a shared e-bike fleet for trial and for sustainability and for progress. But the other magic thing they can't do is overcome awful infrastructure. And so there is a kind of, I think, a false expectation that we can suddenly throw e-bikes or cargo bikes at every situation. If you are scared, you're still scared. And again, we're looking at European scale. Adoption is highest where infrastructure is best, full stop. And e-bikes are no different to bikes. So I think the kind of idea of putting in fleets and in key places like Nottingham or somewhere is put your energy where it's got a chance of success. We're not telling our companies, the parent company for Raleigh could go into any country in the world and try something out, but it makes no sense. So, making sure there are opportunities in quieter towns, quiet roads, well infrastructure, and where there's a constructive partnership with the city, you've got a chance of success.
Thank you. Yes, the infrastructure comes up an awful lot, but also behaviour change as well. I think that one of the crucial things about e-bikes is that they extend the age range that people can use bikes for. I'm combining a couple of questions here because on the one hand, my mum who lives in Germany can go potter around her town on her e-bike, but she finds it very hard to get it onto the train, which you could, because it's quite heavy. And I just wondered, has anyone been thinking about how we combine forms of transport better so that we can use both e-bikes and bus and train infrastructure? Sarah, I'm wondering whether you've got a strategy in your back pocket to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we've tried to do is position some of the e-cargo bikes close to other forms of transportation. So, for example, we've got a couple of them going into one of our park and ride sites. And the aim is that people who might have necessarily used a car for like the last mile of their trip, for example, might decide to use an e-cargo bike. In addition to this, we're also looking at how we can use technology to integrate the different transport modes. So MAS is a key enabler of that. We're actually looking into the TOMP API at the moment because it's a standard used in the Netherlands. So we're trying to learn from them how they integrate their mobility solutions, just so it is more of a seamless journey for people, and it makes it more accessible as well for people to use different modes of transport in a more easy way. But yeah, we've tried to mix up where we've put the e-cargo bikes just so we can get different learnings for how they're used, and one of them is integrating them into other transport solutions.
I think that's really important, because one of the things that I've found both with cargo bikes and e-bikes in general is until someone gets on them, they don't understand the benefit that they give them. Yeah. That, you know, you're kind of like, it really is like riding a bike when you were a kid, not now that you're somewhat older and less fit, and your power to rate ratio is a bit sort of lower. So I don't know whether Rob or Ed wants to comment a bit on that kind of like what the electric extension gives you in terms of your business, in terms of leisure, or Rob, you look like you're trying to press the unmute button.
Sorry about kind of technology. I mean, other than the fact that it's completely transformed our business, because we started our delivery business before any electric assist was available. And the two areas it's transformed, one is just employees, I suppose, and staff and what they're capable of doing. We used to have to manage our team so carefully that they didn't get burnt out, because trying to cycle 60 miles a day on a 100-kilo cargo bike is hard work without any electric assist. And suddenly that's transformed that, so you can have full-time employees that you don't need to manage, that is just a physical active job that's healthy for you, but isn't going to, you couldn't write a job description for some of the guys we used to have in. These are the sort of guys who've run an ultramarathon at a weekend after a week of cycling around. And there were very few people that really could stomach that. Whereas now, actually, you can take anyone can come and do that, because it just takes, obviously, the sweat out of it. So I think that's one transformational bit. And then I think, secondly, just on the consistency of timings and deliveries, we can hit a certain speed all the time. So that's really transformed it, and we can take bigger loads. So all 3 points have been transformational for our business and the opportunities for cargo bikes in a commercial setting.
Oh, Beata, you're on mute. Oh, Beata, you're on mute.
Sorry, I've cocked up with the unmutes. Apologies, everyone. I just wanted to ask Rob very quickly. Someone has said, startup bike couriers, it's difficult to see profitability. You can't be a government-backed business forever. You're not a government-backed business, just for clarity.
No, just for clarity, we're not a government-backed business. Out of our 10 depots, I think we've had support in 2 of them in startup, in helping out with some of the big capital costs of the vehicles. One of the big barriers, and this goes for not just commercially, but also for individuals, that's I think been discussed quite a lot, is the relatively high cost, but not just the relatively high cost, the lack of alternatives. So if I were to go and get an electric van, I can choose one of 5. I'm based in Cambridge. I can probably choose 5 different garages in Cambridge that offer leasing, servicing, the lot. I know exactly what the depreciation will be. I know exactly what the costs will be year to year and what it will be valued at in 5 years' time. With a cargo bike, because it's a new industry, all of that is just not there. There may be in Cambridge, there may be a couple of specialist cargo bike shops, but that's quite unusual. So a whole load of barriers in amongst all of that. And then when you can get a lease, and we were able to suddenly find some companies to offer lease for cargo bikes, they were charging at least 3 times the rate than an electric van, because they didn't understand the asset in the same way. So there are some really, really big challenges there. And I think the role of local authorities in the city is to try to get over some of those barriers by offering shared schemes, by offering finance arrangement, improving infrastructure, building capacity, so getting volume into the system so that there are more cargo bikes being made, the quality of them will become better, all of that stuff. That's what I guess we're all here about trying to do, is trying to encourage and make sure that cargo bikes become a bigger and bigger thing, because as they do take off, it'll become fantastic.
I think, yes, definitely transformative. Ed, do you want to add about the sort of increasing but it's a corollary, increasing the take-up of electric bikes, e-cargo bikes and sustainable active transport, but also are we in a position to actually meet that demand? Because I know that during lockdown, every bike in the country had sold for a bit. So and we've had a question specifically saying, are we there? Are we able to meet that requirement for larger scale cycling adoption in the UK?
Well, again, to your last point there, again, for us as a brand with lots of heritage in the UK, it's about scaling up to meet that demand, but in a sustainable way. We talk about the bicycle and the e-cargo bike being this fantastic entity that is zero emissions and low carbon, but actually, the biggest carbon impact comes from the supply chain. So absolutely, while we do want to scale up, and we certainly will to meet demand, which has been quite phenomenal, if I'm honest, and we're hoping that trend will continue. We do need to do it in a way that effectively meets the points that we are making about the bike, cargo bike, whatever, being the sustainable method of transport moving forward. So that's really our focus. Yes, absolutely, we will, but in the right way. And to your earlier point, I think absolutely, cargo bikes and electric bikes, if you take them as a separate conversation to cargo bikes, they've just broadened the reach and accessibility of the bicycle. It means that perhaps older generations can access cycling again in different ways. People with injuries, perhaps ability before might have been an issue. People that are new to cycling, again, I mentioned it earlier, we're training huge amounts of adults across the UK, and again, that trend will continue. I know there's an ambition from central government to continue that training, but for adults as well as children. So I think it's a really, really positive time for cycling in general.
That's brilliant. I've just wanted to point out in our chat, in our Q&A column, so Food and Drink North East is in Newcastle on Tyne are working on micro hubs for rural towns throughout the region, so we can all watch out to see what they're doing too. I think we've only got 2 minutes left, and in that time, I just wanted to reflect that I'm hearing a really, really positive story. It seems that the last year, despite everything that's going on, we've really kind of seen a lot more cycling, we've seen a lot more e-bikes, we've seen plans being put into place to increase our infrastructure for cycling, which obviously is incredibly important for encouraging those new riders and encouraging people to be more active in general. But the sustainability message that I've taken away from all of you, which is really interesting, is that sharing the bikes and providing the opportunities to share them, it has more than one benefit. It lowers the cost per person that gets to try them out or use them. It means that a much wider variety of people are able to try out and use regularly the electric bikes, electric cargo bikes, but also it increases the use, or it reduces the carbon impact, because if you're using one vehicle in lots of different ways, you're not having to manufacture 5 vehicles to do the same thing. So your cargo bikes are all being used as intensively as possible, and that has a really important environmental impact, because we're not the embedded carbon in manufacture is as Ed points out, the biggest contribution to climate change that the bikes do make. I've just seen, can someone create a blueprint Zedify down right at the bottom of the list? So yes, I think there's the other thing that I'm sort of seeing also is that there's a lot of isolated, really good and interesting things happening all around the country, and trying to replicate this across lots of different areas is actually quite an enormous challenge. And what I'm really hoping is that this seminar and these seminars that have been sponsored by Raleigh have actually really kind of helped to inspire more people around the country to try out these schemes themselves, to get in touch with Ed and with Sarah and with Kevin and with Rob and with myself. I'm quite happy to answer questions in the future about how Cargodale's doing. So I hope that this has kind of like inspired people, maybe answered a few questions, and hopefully we'll be seeing more sustainable transport and more active travel and more e-bikes and e-cargo bike cycling. There are some unanswered questions. We'll do our best to answer them individually to people at the end of the seminar, and keep in contact with everyone who's been on. Thank you very much to my panelists, and thank you very much to everyone that has been part of this session today. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.